I guess, yeah, moving on to the second half of our film recommendation portion of the show. Kind of very, very tonally different from Logan Lucky, but the movie that I recommend Cole to watch was a 2018, I think. Yeah, 2018 action cyberpunk body horror, as it says on Wikipedia, film called Upgrade by Leigh Whannell, who is one of the co-writer and directors of the Saw and The Conjuring and Insidious, like all that like modern horror subgenre stuff. So I guess really quick, but before we talk about specific details, Upgrade is set in a not too distant future where technology has kind of taken over a lot of aspects of life, and we're following this guy who is very old school, is like a mechanic, likes to do everything by hand. He doesn't like all these like digital advancements, and he and his wife end up getting attacked by these gang members, and she gets murdered and he gets paralyzed from the neck down. But he is offered the chance to have an experimental chip put in his spine that gives him control of his limbs again at the price of having this computer constantly in his head talking to him and giving him directions and occasionally taking over the autonomy of his body. And he uses these newfound skills to go out and try and find the people who killed his wife. So what did you think about this movie?
Man, like, so you sent me, I watched the trailer first. I was like, okay, this looks interesting. Like, I thought I would like it. Watched the movie, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I liked it way more than I thought I would. Like, it was so, it felt to me, and I mean this in the best way possible, like a mashup of John Wick and Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Like, and just like the perfect combination of that. Oh, I was like, it finished, and I was like, man, I kind of want to watch it again. Like, it was... You know, I like the themes of it, sort of our terrifying AI robotic future that's pending. Like, I really like that stuff. Even just the action itself and like the camera movements, the style they went with for those fight scenes of the camera sort of tracking the actors in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was so great.
Yeah.
And the most mind-blowing part to me, though, was like, you know, when you watch a movie and then you go onto IMDb and you learn more about it, the fact that it was a $5 billion budget, like, just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I was like, how did he pull this off? It's incredible. It really is, because, like, the production design of it is so good that it's you definitely think it's a way more expensive movie than it is.
Exactly, and it really speaks to his like I said, he's one of the co-writer directors for the Saw movies, and that first movie is kind of known for being made on like very little money, but having like a big sort of production value to it. And that's kind of been the theme that I've seen with a lot of his movies since then. Like he also did that new Invisible Man movie that came out this past year, and I think was also made for a very on a very tight budget. So he's definitely proven that he's very capable of working with a small amount of money and turning out something that's very unique and well made. And I was going to mention the same point that you did. The thing that I really, really love about this movie more than anything else is the action and the way that they utilized new camera techniques to track within the fight. I love that a lot of the kind of the sole focus in a lot of the fight scenes, the camera sort of stabilized on the lead actor's head, because in those sequences it's like he's telling the AI, like, okay, take over my body, kill the bad guys or whatever, and you're kind of, from his perspective, it's like you're just this head on this body that's independently moving of what you want it to do and observing all these crazy things that are happening, and it's so intense in a great way.
I love that camera work in those fight scenes, and the fight scenes themselves, you know, they're very well executed. Of like, yeah, you know, he's got a robot controlling his body, but still like in the realm of realism of like, yeah, someone could kick someone's ass like this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I also love the concept of the literal handguns. I just like, that was like fascinating to me. Of like, wow, like that's actually a really cool concept.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I thought the overall the cinematography of it was wonderful, and the sets, like the set they used for, I can't remember his name, but the billionaire's character's house. It was like,
Yeah.
wow, like this is it rolled that line of the future of like very believable of what our world's going to be now, but just different enough that like it's like technically science fiction, but like well within the realm of our possibilities.
Exactly.
It was so great. And I also love the scene of when the one homeless guy just steals his wheelchair and he calls him a faker, and then
Faker,
he gets
and then
up
he
and
stands
takes
up.
it.
Yeah.
It was so great. And like the movie was made up of those little moments too that like really lended itself to like you're interested in the main character's outcome. Like sometimes when a movie's like a little shorter, it's occasionally it's hard to get into the main character, but like with this one, I was like invested immediately. I think the main actor is sort of like an underrated leading man because he's also the main character in The Invitation.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's the same actor.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, Logan Marshall Green. Yeah, the same guy.
He was great in this movie too. Of just like I totally bought into him. Of like during the fight scenes of him like kicking someone's ass, I was like, I totally buy into this. You know, it's not like it's some scrawny guy or someone who's not believable doing it. It's like, no, he's perfect for this role.
Yeah. And it very like, again, the fact that it's a robot controlling him, he's able to do these like complicated, this like really insane complicated choreography, all the while like just having this like horrified and shocked expression on his face.
Oh
It's
my
like
God, it was
a whole other layer of performance. It's
it
amazing.
kind of also that sort of dynamic for the mid section of the movie between with Stem of like kind of playing the action guy. It kind of reminded me of Venom in a way. Of sort of like this bearded man just being taken over by something inside his body and just wrecking everyone is like it's a great sort of twist on like a buddy cop comedy almost.
Yeah.
But no, the themes of the movie, I think what really like did it for me of like, you know, what's AI going to be like? You know, it's only a matter of time before you have prosthetics are becoming sort of so advanced now that it's like, yeah, it's only a matter of time before we do have those implants in us that can help us control our bodies better. And it's just a fascinating sort of thought process when you're watching the movie of like, I wonder if this could actually happen.
Yeah. That's one thing that I really much enjoy about the movie is the world building aspect, like because I think one problem that you kind of inevitably run into with anything sci-fi is that you run the risk of like having to explain how your world works and like have scenes where like people are like forcing out exposition of like describing like how the self-driving cars work or how this like handgun thing works, and like that just weighs the movie down so much when as we clearly see here, all you have to do is just show it and your brain is like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. This is where we are. And you just fill in the blanks. So I love that it doesn't hold your hand throughout it. It kind of forces you to, it sets a very kind of rigorous pace and it makes you keep up with it. And I think that's very rewarding in sci-fi movies in general, but this especially.
Any sci-fi movie, I think, that just says like, just shows like this is what it is, deal with it, I think is way better off than anything that tries to delve into like, you know, sort of the problem with the Star Wars prequels is sort of like they delved in too much into how the world works instead of just being like, this is how, like, you know, in Upgrade it's like these people have guns that come inside their hands, that's how it is, and it's like, okay, you know, there's not a whole scene of like, oh, they cut open their arm and they put the mechanism in. It's like, no, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
And like the movie also reminded me of Blade Runner in the sense of like, you know, the science fiction of it is kind of just like a backdrop to the bigger themes in the movie. Like, you know, the newest one is sort of like, you know, what does it mean to be human, kind of, and like what are memories and like all these like big existential questions. And this movie is like on a more like physical level of like, you know, it kind of also deals with what it means to be human, of like, you know, if you have this robot in you that's helping you move, how much of that is really you and how much of it is like this AI helping it.
Yeah. And again, like, I guess we can kind of get into spoilers now, so if you haven't seen this movie, go out and see it. You definitely should. I I own it on DVD, but the other ways you can watch it are, let's see, yeah, you can watch it on DVD. You can rent it on Amazon Prime, YouTube, Google Play, Vudu, all the same platforms that Logan Lucky was on, but you'll just have to pay a fee to watch it on Amazon Prime instead of having it included for free. But definitely check it out. It's well worth the experience. So that's the one other thing that I found interesting, is that there is, like, in the sort of darker moments of the movie, you're maybe not as sure, and then especially towards the end you find out, like, okay, no, this is a lot more has been going on that we haven't really been privy to, and it's revealed and executed in a very, very satisfying and frustrating, but frustrating in a good way, method.
Yeah, and the whole movie kind of deals with themes of, like, being manipulated by technology. And it's interesting that, in today's modern world, we kind of already are in a way of, like, how, when you say, like, oh, I'm looking for a new, like, couch, and you open your phone and all the ads you see are related to couches. Mm-hmm. Like, it kind of happens in a way of, like, of a subtle way of, like, being influenced by technology. And this movie takes it to the next level of, like, your whole body being manipulated by it. Yeah. Without you actively realizing it.
Right. It's especially, again, as we get to kind of the last 20 minutes when STEM shuts down and is like, we're going to do this my way or the highway. So what's it going to be? Like, that's where we kind of really get into, like, that whole, like, body horror aspect of, like, being a passenger in your own body, or, like, not having control over what's happening to you. It's very old sort of horror concepts, but executed in a very new and unique way that, again, kind of like you said, harkens back a little bit to, like, Ex Machina, where we have, like, an ending and a delivery on some concepts that were teased early on in the movie, where you're like, no, that can't be the way it ends. And again, like, as we said earlier with, like, the pace of the movie, that it just kind of says, well, no, that's what it is, deal with it. And it's frustrating in a like, just, again, frustrating in a satisfying way.
Yeah, and the body horror aspect of it, coming from someone, like, I don't really watch horror movies, it's just not my thing. And, like, to have that aspect in the end for me, it's like, oh my god, like, this is actually terrifying. Like, because for most of the movie, like, you're not really thinking it's gonna happen, especially for someone who, like, I knew what the director had done, Invisible Man and Saw and stuff, but, like, as someone who wasn't necessarily thinking about that, I was like, oh, like, this movie's just about, like, a guy and his robot friend just, like, kicking ass and taking names. Like, this is great. And then it gets to, like, yeah, like you said, the last 20 minutes, I'm like, oh my god, this is terrible. What's this poor man? Like, all he wanted to do was beat people up and avenge his wife. And, like, but it was such a great, a great hour and a half spent watching this movie.
Yeah.
Like, and it leaves you, I love when movies leave you wanting more of, like, obviously, I don't know if they can do a sequel on the same budget. I think Blumhouse is going to need to kick in a few more million to really, like, to really push a sequel. But, like, it just, it was so, and, like, the worst part, the best and worst part of the ending is, like, it gives you hope in these, like, brief moments that, like,
right,
the worst outcome isn't going to happen. Like, he's gonna win. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And, like, it just takes you the complete opposite direction. So great.
Yeah. I love the kind of, I think the term for it is the unsatisfactory ending. I think it's executed in a great way. Like you said, it leaves you wanting more, but not in the way where you're dissatisfied with it. Like, even though, like, very contradictory that it's an unsatisfactory ending and you're not dissatisfied with how it goes, but it delivers on what it sets out to be. Like, it's a very, like, the one thing that I've heard it equated to is it's a very modern B movie, where it's a very simple premise and it delivers on that premise, but it throws in that extra little bit of garnish at the very end that you weren't expecting, and I think that's what pushes it over the top.
Yeah, that's true. And like, I think especially in today's film landscape, like, more of these B movies are kind of needed. And, like, it doesn't need to be, like, action-y. It can just be even B movie romantic comedies and stuff like that. Like, I feel like with the rise of streaming service and stuff, there's a growing and growing audience for this stuff. They'll just watch it no matter what.
Right.
And, I'm hoping that, I mean, I know Blumhouse Pictures is doing this all the time, just gives directors, these smaller budget, and he says, go wild. Like, whatever you want to do with this $5 million, like, we trust you. We'll see what happens. Because if it sucks, we only lost, probably $3 million total on it. So whatever.
Yeah.
Having a company that's willing to take these risks with these directors that have such a sense of style and stuff is great. And we just need more of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's definitely I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the stuff that they've put out. Lately they've been putting out some good stuff with like Jordan Peele's efforts, and some of the more, like, I think they also had a hand in the Invisible Man movie as well, but it's very good to have studios like that are willing to encourage ideas that might not necessarily work. I mean, in this guy's case, he's proven that he's competent and capable with directing and managing a movie, but I think it is very important to have the studios that are willing to take those risks, because we've kind of ended up in this society where movies are very, like, by the numbers. Like, it's become a business where we're putting in an investment and we're expecting a return, and we're not going to put our money on something that we don't know is going to give us a return. Like, everyone's always complaining about all the Marvel movies and the Star Wars sequels and all the remakes of, like, the 90s, our 90s childhood favorites. Like, but it's good to know that, like, the independent market is not as niche as it seems to be. Like, there are risks being taken, and they yield great movies like this.
Yeah, like, like you said about Blumhouse, like, I'm not going to go to the theater and watch Happy Death Day 2, but I appreciate that, like, someone's greenlighting and saying, yeah, let's make this and see what happens. And, like, the fact that in today's world, Scorsese, which I totally butchered his name and I always do, has to, like, go around begging for money for his next movie is, like, just insane to me, that no studio will just write him a check blindly and not care about the cost.
Right.
Like, the like you said, it's always been a business, but now it's even more so of, like, all that matters is the bottom line and, like, what our investors are getting out of it.
Yeah.
So,
if it's not going to be $1 billion hit, then it's not worth our time. Like,
yeah, the fact that, whatever the Stars Han Solo movie, like, only grossed $600 million, or, like, this is a failure, and it's like, but it's $600 million. Yeah. I mean, that's not a small amount of cash.
Right.
The fact that we're living in that kind of world is it's crazy to me, especially if you look back at, like, movies that were made in the 90s and even the thousands, and it's, like, just such a different landscape. But, hopefully if enough of you buy Upgrade on Amazon, we'll get more of them. We'll get Upgrade 2, hopefully.
We'll finally get the conclusion, or not the conclusion, but we'll see what comes next in that amazing cliffhanger of an ending. But yeah, anything else you wanted to say about Upgrade?
Let me check. I made a list of, like, notes to say on this. I think the one thing I just wanted to do is, like, the production design is just so interesting to me, and I think that's a lesson that anyone can take into their projects, big or small, of, like, it matters what's in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Even if you're filming, the typical college, 2 people in the dorm room, like, what you put, the posters that are hanging on that character's dorm room matter. It's completely, that character is read completely different if that poster is, like, Iron Man poster versus, like, an Inglourious Basterds poster. Like, right. Those two things have different messages on the background of the character. And so, like, even in Upgrade, it's, way more of a sci-fi kind of situation, but it's also, like, the production design of, like, the main character always looks, like, a little dirty almost. Like, he always kind of has grime and dirt in his face of, like, being this physical mechanic and, like, caring about the old school machinery kind of thing. And it's the same thing on your small projects of, like, yeah, if you have a character that's supposed to be, like, a rich snob, his shoes probably shouldn't be super dirty. It should be spotless. And it's like all these little details are on the screen really matter. And it doesn't cost you that much to improve. Like, the cost of doing, like, decent production design versus getting a decent camera. Like, production design is way cheaper, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So, it's an investment that really pays off.
Yeah, that's why I think one thing that a lot of people get bogged down by is like having the nicest, newest equipment. But like, I mean, as you said, Steven Soderbergh has shot stuff on an iPhone before, and that's turned out amazing. So it is kind of like you got to pay attention to a lot of different areas that are not necessarily like as noticed by most people, but like subconsciously it's important. Like, no one's gonna, your average moviegoer is not gonna come out of here going like, oh man, I really liked how dirty that one mobster's apartment was. That really like put me in the moment. They're going to talk about like, oh man, the action and effects are great. But like subconsciously, if that value wasn't there, then that average moviegoer would notice it. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those jobs where if it's done well, you don't think about it unless you're like someone like us who like does pay attention to those things. But it's important, and it definitely does leave an impact, whether people notice it or not.
Yeah, and as a creator of something, especially movies, it's like you want to portray as what you're showing is authentic in the sense of that world is real. No matter how ridiculous it is or different from the normal world is, you want to present it as like, this is the truth. So like every little detail of what's on screen really matters. And like, it's cheesy to say, but yeah, your story, your characters, your production design, your costume work, all matters way more than what you're shooting it on. Like when you go and see a movie at the theater, the first thing people are talking about when they leave the theater aren't like, oh, did you know that was shot on a red? Unless you're a super cinematography nerd, which exists. Right. But the average person's gonna be like, oh, that scene when he like cut that dude up in the bar was insane. Like, that's what people are gonna notice, not anything else.
Right. It's just on the whole, just such an amazing, crazy action movie that is unlike anything out there. So definitely go see it.